On a U.S. Air Force base, something unimaginable is happening. The Americans are giving a group of Soviet military officials a tour of some of their most dangerous frontline aircraft. With the Cold War as good as over, the Americans proudly show off the technology that helped them win. But as they begin the tour, the Soviets' attention is immediately grabbed by one particular aircraft in a distant corner of the hangar. Oblivious to this fixation, the Americans position the tour group beside the majestic F-18, the most agile combat jet of its generation. But the Soviets couldn't care less. Confused by their disinterest, the Americans moved to their crown jewel, the mighty F-15, the USAF's undefeated air superiority fighter. But the Soviets won't stop nudging each other and pointing at the strange-looking aircraft in the corner. For decades, this was the machine that had fueled their nightmares. Of all the aircraft in the Western arsenal, this was the one they considered the greatest threat of all, the infamous Whispering Death. In May 1960, a U-2 spy plane was blasted out of the sky over the Soviet Union. Just like that, the myth of invincibility at 70,000 feet was over. For years, bombers like the B-47 and Britain's V-Force cruised the stratosphere under the illusion of safety. But the Soviets had caught up. Surface-to-air missiles now had the reach and the punch to strike at altitude. The age of high-altitude penetration didn't just end, it was annihilated in one missile attack. Strategic Air Command began shifting toward low-level tactics. Flying just above the terrain reduced radar detection and dodged most Soviet defenses. At those altitudes, missiles struggled to lock on, and interceptors couldn't rely on their usual speed advantage. But low-level flight at high speed placed intense demands on airframes and crews. Turbulence and terrain following made each mission a white-knuckle sprint. The Air Force needed a new kind of strike aircraft, one that could scream through enemy territory at Mach 1.2, roughly 920 miles per hour while hugging the ground, and it had to do this for 400 miles straight after already flying another 400. That meant a total low-level range of over 800 miles. The aircraft also had to operate from rough airstrips as short as 3,000 feet, carry at least 1,000 pounds of internal ordnance, and eventually be modified for reconnaissance roles. At the same time, the U.S. Navy had its own problems. Soviet bombers and submarines were becoming a serious threat to carrier groups. The Navy's straight-wing Douglas F-6D Missileer project tried to counter this by creating a missile platform that could loiter for hours and launch long-range intercepts. But it was slow, fragile, and canceled in 1961. Something better was needed, and NASA had been quietly solving part of the puzzle. In 1958, they demonstrated a simpler swing-wing design that finally made variable geometry wings viable. These wings could shift mid-flight, sweeping back for high speed or extending forward for takeoff and landing. The result was better agility, shorter runway needs, and enough lift to carry more fuel and heavier weapons. That cleared the runway for a new kind of aircraft, one that didn't just fly fast, but could survive the gauntlet, the multi-role fighter. These jets combine the speed and maneuverability of a fighter with the payload and precision strike capabilities of a bomber. They can dogfight one mission, then drop guided bombs the next. This versatility means fewer specialized aircraft are needed, cutting costs and simplifying logistics. Pilots trained on one platform can switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground roles seamlessly. This flexibility is extremely valuable for nations with limited budgets or smaller air forces. U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stepped into the Pentagon in early 1961, facing a tangled web of competing demands. The Air Force demanded a fast, powerful strike aircraft to dominate enemy skies and deliver heavy payloads deep behind enemy lines. The Navy needed a rugged, carrier-capable fighter, agile enough to protect its fleets and withstand harsh sea conditions. Yet their missions pulled in opposite directions. McNamara watched two separate, costly programs take shape, each threatening to drain resources and stall progress. On February 14th, he made a bold call, merged the efforts into a single program, the Tactical Fighter Experimental, or TFX. Behind the scenes, neither service liked the idea. The Air Force wanted a deep-strike, low-level bomber that could fly through Soviet defenses at over Mach 1 while skimming the treetops. The Navy needed a carrier-based interceptor that could shoot down threats before they ever reached the fleet. Fast, agile, and able to loiter at high altitude. The Air Force preferred tandem seating, one behind the other, to streamline the fuselage and improve ground attack visibility. The Navy insisted on side-by-side seating, so the pilot and radar operator could both watch the massive radar scope needed for air defense. Then came the hard numbers. The Air Force wanted a 70-foot aircraft rated to pull 7.33 Gs, capable of Mach 2.5 up high and Mach 1.2 down low. The Navy's version could be shorter, 56 feet, rated for 6 Gs, with a top speed of Mach 2 and subsonic cruise at low level. Despite the pushback, McNamara moved forward. He based the TFX specs mostly on the Air Force's wish list and launched the program in September 1961. A request for proposals went out in October, and 6 big names answered: Boeing, General Dynamics, Lockheed, McDonnell, North American, and Republic. Boeing's design kept winning the internal evaluations, but in November 1962, McNamara picked General Dynamics instead. The deciding factor was that their design shared more components between the Air Force and Navy versions, promising cost savings and easier logistics. On December 21, 1962, the contract was signed. The TFX was officially airborne, at least on paper. With General Dynamics leading the project under engineer Robert H. Whitmer, the TFX program moved from concept to metal. The plan called for 2 variants, an Air Force-focused F-111A and a Navy-specific F-111B, both built on the same core design. To build a fighter capable of carrier operations, they joined forces with Grumman in 1963. Grumman took responsibility for creating a landing gear tough enough to handle carrier decks and the rear fuselage. Both the F-111A and B shared engines, airframes, and side-by-side crew seating inside a single pressurized escape capsule, a complex and uncommon feature for combat jets. To meet demands for long-range and heavy payloads, the F-111 introduced several new features. The wings could pivot in flight, fully extended for takeoff, and then swept back to cut through the air at speeds exceeding Mach 2.5. Twin afterburning turbofan engines provided the thrust necessary to sustain fast, low-level flight. However, these advanced features added weight and contributed to developmental delays. The Air Force's F-111A came equipped with advanced terrain-following radar, allowing it to fly just above the ground at night or in poor weather with minimal pilot input. It also had an attack radar system and room for nuclear or conventional weapons. The Navy's F-111B featured a shorter nose to fit carrier elevators and carried a large radar designed to guide long-range missiles. The first F-111A was unveiled in October 1964 in Fort Worth, Texas, and flew in December of that year. Early test flights exposed serious engine problems, compressor stalls, flameouts, and unstable airflow that made the aircraft unpredictable and sometimes flat-out dangerous. The F-111's powerful afterburning turbofan engines needed clean, consistent air, but at high speeds and varying altitudes, the airflow kept breaking up. This led to a sudden loss of thrust, especially during hard maneuvers. Engineers overhauled the intake system, creating the now iconic triple plow design. These curved intake ramps, with variable geometry, controlled how air entered the engines at different speeds, smoothing the flow, preventing turbulence, and keeping the engines lit and stable, no matter what the mission demanded. Production plans fluctuated due to rising costs, weight problems, and added variants, including strategic bombers and reconnaissance models, slowing the program. In 1968, the Navy canceled the F-111B. Cracks found in wing attachment points led to the entire Air Force fleet being grounded in 1969, requiring a complete redesign before flights resumed in 1970. Flight testing continued into 1972, while the F-111 family expanded. Australia ordered the F-111C. The Air Force added upgraded versions, incorporating the F-111D, E, and F, plus the FB-111A strategic bomber and the EF-111 Raven electronic warfare aircraft. By the time production ended in 1976, 563 F-111s had been built. The F-111 was designed as a versatile all-weather attack aircraft, capable of low-level penetration through enemy defenses to strike targets effectively. The airframe was built mostly from aluminum alloys to keep weight down, with high-strength steel and titanium added in stress-heavy zones like the wing pivots and engine mounts. The fuselage used a semi-monocoque layout, meaning the outer skin helped carry structural loads, reinforced with stiffened panels and honeycomb cores that added rigidity without extra bulk. It was strong but light, able to take hits and keep flying. The tail used an all-moving horizontal stabilizer, or stabilator, which adjusted as a single surface instead of just using hinged elevators. that gave sharper, more responsive pitch control at both subsonic and supersonic speeds, crucial for low-level bombing runs and high-speed terrain-hugging flight. The aircraft's landing gear featured a 3-point system with 2 single-wheel main gears centered under the fuselage and a 2-wheel nose gear. The main landing gear doors also functioned as speed brakes during flight, enhancing the aircraft's control. Most F-111 variants were equipped with terrain-following radar integrated with an autopilot system, allowing automated low-altitude flight. Power came from 2 Pratt & Whitney TF-30 afterburning turbofan engines, a new technology at the time, providing the thrust required for supersonic speeds and sustained low-level operations. The F-111 had an internal weapons bay, capable of holding bombs, a removable 20mm M61 cannon, or auxiliary fuel tanks. This bay could carry 2 750-pound conventional bombs, 1 nuclear bomb, or practice bombs. The Navy's F-111B version had enough space in its weapons bay for 2 AIM-54 Phoenix long-range air-to-air missiles. Though the cannon featured a large ammunition capacity, it was rarely installed. Some models, like the F-111C and F, carried the PAVE-TAC targeting system, allowing laser-guided bombing. Of the 4 external pylons, the inner 2 swiveled with the wings to maintain alignment with the fuselage. The outer 2 had a fixed orientation, but could carry a 5,000-pound load. The F-111's design prevented mounting weapons directly under the fuselage, but it could carry electronic countermeasure pods and data link pods beneath. Tactical versions of the F-111 carried AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles on their inner wing pylons, short-range, heat-seeking air-to-air weapons used for self-defense against enemy fighters. They gave the otherwise bomber-focused F-111 at least a fighting chance if intercepted. Strategic FB-111 models also typically use pylons for fuel tanks or nuclear gravity bombs, including AGM-69 SRAM missiles. The Australian F-11Cs expanded this capability. They were modified to launch AGM-84 Harpoon missiles, designed to skim low over the ocean and strike enemy ships with high explosive warheads, giving the aircraft a lethal naval strike role. They also carried Popeye standoff missiles, which were long-range, precision-guided weapons that could hit hardened or well-defended targets from outside enemy air defenses. With cutting-edge tech under its skin, the Aardvark was ready to prove itself in the skies. The first 6 F-111s arrived at Nellis Air Force Base on July 17, 1967, primarily for training fighter squadrons. The 428th Tactical Fighter Squadron declared initial operational capability in April 1968. In March 1968, 6 aircraft from the 474th Tactical Fighter Wing launched the Combat Lancer mission over Southeast Asia. These flights aimed to push the revolutionary swing-wing bomber's advanced tech, variable geometry wings, afterburning turbofans, and automated terrain-following radar into the harsh reality of the Vietnam War. Operating mostly under the cover of night, the F-111 struck 55 high-risk sorties deep into North Vietnamese territory, targeting enemy infrastructure with precision and speed. The mission showcased the aircraft's ability to fly low and fast, dodging radar and surface fire while delivering devastating payloads. But victory came at a heavy cost. 2 planes vanished without a trace late in March, raising alarms. Then in April, a third was lost in a violent crash caused by a catastrophic hydraulic failure in the horizontal stabilizer control rod. This sent the aircraft into an uncontrollable pitch, ending the lives of the crew instantly. Grounded immediately, inspections revealed the flaw in 42 more F-111s. The cause of the 2 earlier disappearances remained a mystery, but the defect was the likely culprit. Combat Lancer was abruptly halted, and by November, the battered 474th Tactical Fighter Wing returned stateside, its full strength not restored until 1971. By September 1972, the F-111 was back in action at Tak Le Air Base, Thailand. Pilots flew the last month of Operation Linebacker and then took part in the massive Operation Linebacker 2 bombing campaign. Known among North Vietnamese troops as Whispering Death, due to the quiet roar of its engines at low altitude, the F-111 proved devastating. Its terrain-following radar let pilots fly as low as 200 feet at nearly 500 knots, avoiding enemy radar and missiles. The aircraft could carry the bomb load of 4 F-4 Phantoms, drastically increasing strike power. Over the course of the war, F-111s flew more than 4,000 combat missions, with only 6 lost to enemy action. After the Vietnam War, the F-111 remained forward deployed. Starting in mid-1973, the 347th Tactical Fighter Wing operated from Tak Le and then Karat Royal Thai Air Force Base. They bombed Khmer Rouge positions in Cambodia until American combat support ended in August 1973. During the Mayaguez incident, the F-111s weren't just backup. They were the sharp end of the spear. On May 13, 1975, two unarmed F-111s, yanked from a training run, tore across the skies near Polowai in low-level, high-speed passes over the captured American cargo ship SS Mayaguez, a brazen show of force that forced the Khmer Rouge to halt the ship near Kotong. Hours later, F-111s returned, sweeping past a fishing boat suspected of carrying the captured crew. They fired in front of the escorts, scattering them. One fled, another was sunk. Fast, precise, and relentless, the F-111s delivered pressure and intimidation on demand. The F-111's operational history extended well beyond Southeast Asia. In an unusual humanitarian mission on February 14, 1986, two FB-111 bombers flew from New Hampshire to Oklahoma to transport a heart for transplant, landing at Bradley International Airport for the handoff. In 1986, the F-111 took center stage in Operation El Dorado Canyon, the bold airstrike against Libya. From the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing, backed by EF-111 electronic warfare aircraft, launched from UK bases on a grueling 6,400-mile round trip. This 13-hour mission remains the longest fighter combat sortie in history. The F-111 struck deep, targeting key Libyan military installations with precision, relying on their swing-wing design and advanced avionics to evade enemy defenses. The raid severely damaged Libya's capabilities, but came at a cost. One F-111 was lost over the Mediterranean, believed to have been shot down. By the late 1980s, the Cold War, the conflict the F-111 had been designed to fight, was drawing to a close. As tensions thawed, military exchanges between former adversaries became possible. During one such visit, U.S. Air Forces in Europe hosted Soviet military officials at a static aircraft display. American F-4s, F-15s, and F-16s sat gleaming on the tarmac, representing the latest in Western air power. But the Soviet visitors showed interest in only one aircraft, the F-111. The American hosts were shocked by the singular focus. F-111 Weapon Systems Officer Jim Rotremel later learned why, explaining, quote, "It turns out that aside from the SR-71, the F-111 was the plane they considered the greatest threat." The former enemy's assessment was unambiguous. This was the bomber that could have ended their world. Indeed, in 1991, the F-111 would prove just how effective it could be. What happened during the Gulf War's Operation Desert Storm wasn't just tactical success. It was the vindication of a prediction made years earlier. During training exercises in Spain, Jim Rotremel had watched his aircraft's devastating precision from median altitude. He later recalled, quote, "I remarked at the time that if we were ever unleashed in combat, where we could attack from medium to high altitude instead of low level like we trained for, it would almost be unfair to those we were attacking." Desert Storm proved him prophetic. The F-111F variant dominated the conflict, flying with unmatched precision and reliability. It completed over 3 successful strike missions for every failure, outperforming all other U.S. strike aircraft. F-111Fs dropped nearly 80% of the war's laser-guided bombs, dominating 2 distinct types of precision warfare. Against hardened targets, they deployed the massive GBU-28 Bunker Buster, a 4,800-pound bomb designed to penetrate deep into reinforced concrete and detonate inside command bunkers and aircraft shelters. But it wasn't just the size of the bombs that terrorized Iraqi forces. It was the surgical precision of their delivery. F-111F crews developed a devastating tactic they called consecutive miracles. The first laser-guided bomb would punch a precise hole through the reinforced concrete roof of a hardened aircraft shelter. Milliseconds later, the second bomb would follow the exact same laser path, diving through that fresh opening to detonate inside the bunker. The results were catastrophic. Hardened shelters that could withstand direct hits from conventional bombs were turned inside out by explosions contained within their own reinforced walls. Iraqi airfield personnel quickly learned to fear the night. During daylight hours, they felt safe hiding inside the massive concrete bunkers. But when darkness fell and the F-111Fs prowled overhead, they abandoned the shelters entirely, preferring to take their chances in the open desert rather than be trapped inside when the consecutive miracles began. But the F-111's most celebrated role came in what pilots dubbed tank plinking, the systematic destruction of Iraqi armor using smaller, precision-guided bombs. One laser-guided bomb, one tank. Night after night, F-111Fs prowled the desert, their targeting systems turning individual enemy vehicles into funeral pyres. Iraqi tank crews learned the same lesson as the airfield personnel. Sleeping in their armored vehicles at night was a bad idea. The warm metal drew the F-111's infrared sensors like a beacon, and dawn would reveal nothing but twisted wreckage where entire tank formations had bedded down. By war's end, F-111s had destroyed more than 1,500 Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles, nearly matching the tally of the legendary A-10 tank killer aircraft. Alongside the F-111F, 18 F-111E models also flew combat missions. The F-111's blend of speed, range, and precision strike capability made it a decisive weapon in the coalition's swift victory, proving its value decades after entering service. Yet perhaps no moment better captured the F-111's lethal versatility than an incident on January 17, 1991. Captains James Denton and Brent Brandini Brandon were flying their EF-111 Raven, an electronic warfare variant stripped of all weapons to make room for jamming equipment. Their mission was to lead coalition strike aircraft through Iraqi air defenses, using their sophisticated electronics to blind enemy radar stations. An Iraqi Mirage F-1EQ pilot, having just escaped pursuit by an F-15 Eagle, spotted the lone Raven skimming the desert at barely 1,000 feet. Here was his chance, an apparently defenseless American aircraft, an easy target. The Raven's cockpit erupted in warning lights and alarms. They were being painted by the Mirage's radar. Denton threw the aircraft into evasive maneuvers as the first R-550 Magic missile streaked toward them through the darkness. Brandon worked the countermeasures console, popping flares as Denton attempted to twist the heavy aircraft away from certain doom. The missile missed. Seconds later, a second Magic left the Mirage's rails. Again, the desperate dance. Violent turns, more flares, the EF-111 shuddering under the G-forces. The second missile was fooled away into the desert night. But the Iraqi pilot wasn't finished. With his missile spent, he closed in to use his guns, the twin 30mm cannons of his Mirage ready to tear the defenseless Raven apart. That's when Denton had an idea that bordered on insanity. He dove the EF-111 toward the desert floor, using the aircraft's terrain-following radar to navigate in the pitch-black night at a dangerously low altitude. The Mirage pilot followed, target fixated, determined to finish what he'd started. At the last possible second, Denton yanked back on the stick and slammed the throttles forward. The powerful TF-30 engines hurled the Raven skyward at the speed of sound. The Iraqi pilot, caught in the lethal cocktail of darkness, low altitude, and tunnel vision, couldn't react in time. His Mirage slammed into the desert floor at 500 knots, erupting in a fireball that lit up the night sky below the climbing Raven. Denton and Brandon had just scored the first and only air-to-air victory in F-111 history, without firing a single shot. Both men received the Distinguished Flying Cross for what the Air Force would later call, quote, superior airmanship under combat conditions. But for the F-111 family, it was something more. Proof that even when stripped of its weapons, the Aardvark could still be a predator. Despite its battlefield successes, the F-111 was expensive to maintain. Pilots and crews acknowledged it consumed a disproportionate share of Tactical Air Command's budget. It had remained a backbone of the Air Force strike fleet for over 3 decades. The F-111 was officially retired by the USAF in 1996, receiving its formal nickname, Aardvark, at the retirement ceremony, an informal moniker it had carried for years. They named it Aardvark after the Afrikaans word for earth pig, a fitting tag for the F-111's long pointed nose that looked like an animal sniffing the ground. The EF-111 electronic warfare variant's retirement in 1998 marked the end of the F-111's frontline service, but its influence lived on through a range of specialized roles and adaptations. The F-111A pioneered fast, long-range strikes with Mach 2.3 speed and terrain-following radar. The bulky Navy F-111B influenced the F-14 Tomcat. The F-B-111A, a nuclear bomber, retired after the B-1B Lancer arrived, closing the chapter on this versatile Cold War workhorse. Meanwhile, other variants found extended life abroad, most notably in Australia, where the F-111 would leave a lasting legacy. Australia purchased 24 F-111Cs to replace the English electric Canberras for bombing and tactical strike roles. The Canberras, First-generation jet bombers from the 1950s could hit 580 miles per hour and climb above 48,000 feet, but lacked modern avionics, low-level survivability, and supersonic speed, making the F-111C a massive leap in range, speed, and strike precision. The first F-111C was handed over in September 1968, but structural problems delayed its entry into service. It wasn't until March 15, 1973, that Australia officially accepted its first functional F-111C at Nellis Air Force Base. The next 6 F-111Cs arrived at RAAF Base Amberley on July 1, 1973, followed by 3 more shipments through the year. These jets were assigned to the No. 1 Squadron and No. 6 Squadron under No. 82 Wing. The Australians quickly took to the aircraft, affectionately calling it the Pig. The F-111C became the fastest, longest-range combat aircraft in Southeast Asia. This gave Australia a rare independent strike capability. During tense Indonesian cabinet meetings over East Timor's independence, Benny Murdani reportedly warned Indonesian officials, quote, "Do you realize the Australians have a bomber that can put a bomb through that window onto the table here in front of us?" Australian F-111s stood ready during the deployment of the Australian-led International Force for East Timor, prepared to strike if necessary. In 2006, an RAAF F-111 played a decisive role in sinking the North Korean ship Pongsu, which was involved in drug smuggling. The F-111's high maintenance demands, requiring extensive hours for every flight hour, led to its gradual retirement. The process began in late 2007 with the F-111G models operated by No. 6 Squadron. Australia procured 24 Boeing FA-18EF Super Hornets as an interim replacement, while delays slowed the arrival of the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II. Unlike the long-range supersonic F-111C built for deep strike bombing, the Super Hornet is a multi-role workhorse, slower and with shorter legs, but capable of precision strike, air combat, and electronic warfare, all with lower upkeep and state-of-the-art systems. On December 3, 2010, Australia officially retired its last F-111s, closing the chapter on a remarkable era for the RAAF strike capability. However, the F-111 Aardvark's swing wings left many design lessons still impacting aeronautical technology today. Active aeroelastic wing technology doesn't swing or fold, it flows. The wing itself twists and bends mid-flight, flexing like muscle beneath skin. Unlike the Aardvark's swing wing, with its bulky pivots and radar-reflective seams, this tech keeps a smooth, seamless surface, perfect for stealth. Already proven by the X-53, a modified FA-18, engineers have watched the aircraft control its role by bending the wing itself. The benefits are lighter wings, longer range, more payload, and unmatched agility across mission types. Still maturing, this tech carries forward the Aardvark's legacy. One aircraft, many missions, adapting its shape to dominate the skies. The Aardvark forced the air to bend around it. Now the jet itself bends to the air.